Okay, can you guys see my screen?
Yeah, we're able to
Of
see
course, I
it.
have to ask that question. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. We'll spend some time talking about me through this presentation, but I really want to make sure we get some time to answer your questions and have a discussion. First of all, I'm Diana Sapanaro. I'm a UX research director at a company called Anywhere Real Estate. Yes, that's a real name, but you might be more familiar with some of our real estate brands like Coldwell Banker, Century 21. Um, um, Corcoran, etc. So I'll talk about my career journey, which I'm a Pratt alum. It's been 10 years since I graduated school, which is so wild to think about. But as I was talking with Roshni at the beginning, I love Pratt. I love Craig. Like I had such an amazing experience. And so I'm really excited to chat with you all and be a resource on your journey here. So before we get into more about me as a practitioner and a professional, I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Diana. I'm really excited to be here and chat with you all. Outside of design, I enjoy candle making, dog training, and traveling with my husband. Bonus points to whoever guesses the picture in the bottom right. I won't give it away, but there are no actual bonus points, but for fun. So yeah, just wanted to introduce myself as a human outside of the industry. As I mentioned, what we're going to talk about today is kind of my career journey. I'll touch on the day to day a bit, and then feel free to interrupt with questions as well. Um, I'll provide hopefully some valuable tips and tricks for y'all breaking into the space. But again, ask some questions and we'll have a discussion. And then I have some dedicated time for us to talk. I did not update my slide numbers, I realize here, but that's okay. All right, career journey. And I'm going to use that word very intentionally because it is really a journey. And I think that's, yes, La Sagrada Familia is exactly right. That was when we went to Barcelona last year. It was super beautiful. Career journey is just that. I think it's important for folks to really take that in. And especially nowadays, like things are always changing with technology. I mean, that's kind of how it's always been, but it's important to keep in mind that it is a journey. And I'll walk you through kind of some steps along mine here. So my first one being at Pratt, but I'll take us a step back before. So I have a background in sociology and anthropology. And so for me, that kind of social sciences background, coupled with some of the practical coursework that I got at Pratt in terms of actually applying design thinking practices, building empathy for users, understanding the tools that you use, the frameworks that you use in this space, really helped me build a strong foundation in like understanding people, designing with empathy. And frankly, if it wasn't for Pratt, I never would have even really come across like what we call UX, which now I'm sure y'all know this, like folks also refer to it as product design in the space. But it was in Craig's classes that I really had this epiphany moment of like, whoa, this is super cool. I can take the things that I love about working with people and understanding people and apply it to relevant technology. And so for me, that's kind of was the catalyst on my journey. The next step, I moved into consulting. And so I worked with a few different consulting agencies. And what I loved about consulting was it exposed me to a wide range of industries, different clients and users. And so I got the ability to learn really fast. So when you do consulting, right, they pay you for your time. And so you've got to move quickly. But it also presented some really interesting challenges that helped me adapt the work in an environment that was sometimes less than ideal. Like I didn't always have all the budget to do what I needed to do, but we still had a goal that we wanted to meet. So it helped me really learn how to take this vision of a research approach or a design approach and then kind of work backwards into a practical application of it. The other thing too about consulting that I loved that was really helpful is I got to work with so many different teams in different industries, like I said, but it helped me hone kind of my ability to communicate across diverse teams and speak their language, right? So I think sometimes we use the words that make most sense to us in UX or product design, but not everyone is really entrenched and ingrained in our world. And so it forced me, for lack of a better word, to kind of get out of my own space and use the words that they use. So I could deeply connect with them and make sure that the work I was doing as a consultant, i.e. what they were paying me for, was relevant to them. I would say the next big kind of stop in my journey was moving in-house. So consulting for me, again, I could adapt quickly and work with a bunch of different users and industry types. A lot of my work was more in the B2C space, so business to consumer. But from consulting, I moved in-house to IBM. And so I felt like consulting taught me really how to deliver the work and do good work quickly and adapt in different environments, where I really didn't always have the ability to see my work through to the end. So, consulting engagements have an end date. And so we would kind of work with them through the conclusion of the research or the design project, and then I may never see them again. And that, to me, I felt like was a gap in my experience. And so I was able to move in-house and kind of fill that gap where I could learn to kind of sustain the work, build long-term partnerships, and like really see the work through to shape outcomes. That's one thing that I do love about being in-house versus consulting is you're there for the long haul. So like you see the outcome of your work and you're able to really work through that messy middle of going from insight to impact, or insight to solution to impact, right? If you're thinking about the design solution in the middle there. So those were kind of things in my journey that I really appreciated. I would say the stop I'm at now, and you'll see why I mentioned this in a sec, but through that journey, I was focusing more as an individual contributor and how do I deliver results and communicate effectively with my cross-functional peers to ensure that insights are integrated into our design solutions and the product. But then beyond that, I've transitioned into a leadership role. And so for me, this is now about kind of this stop in my career is about kind of expanding my impact and scaling that impact. So it's kind of for me now it's about doing the work, working with people, creating systems, and creating a culture around the work to make sure that the work is being able to deliver on what is required from us in design for the business, but also still meeting our customer goals, and making sure that the team and the teams that are doing the work are focusing on the most high priority work, given kind of some of the things that we aligned on from a leadership perspective. So just to summarize kind of my journey so far, my education, which has been really the foundation that I've built everything upon. So I think I started this off like y'all are in some great hands, and over there at Pratt, I really appreciate the experience that I have. And I actually keep in touch with some of the folks that I went to graduate school with. So it's really nice to be able to build that community and connection, not just like, the coursework, like the people part. And then as I talked about, kind of consulting for me was about learning through variety, ability to adapt, communicate effectively across diverse teams. Moving in-house was really about building deep partnerships and focusing on long-term impact. And then leadership is now scaling that impact kind of through people, systems, and culture. I can talk a little bit more about these in a sec as well. Y'all have any questions about that? I have some career reflections, but like before I move on, any questions kind of about my journey so far? Okay. Give me a sec to take a sip of coffee too. Career reflection. So I figured it's not just helpful to maybe talk through my journey and the stops, but also things that maybe I've learned along the way. And I think one thing that is super critical and important to keep in mind is careers aren't linear. So I used that visual intentionally. Like they are really built from zigs and zags and lessons. And so when I was in school at Pratt, I initially went into that program because I wanted to be I wanted to be an academic librarian. This is kind of getting into my next bullet. I wanted to be an academic librarian. And then I started taking some of the more UX focused courses, and I was like, whoa. When I say I had an aha moment, I was not joking. I legitimately had an aha moment. But I really loved my undergrad in social science and learning about people and also systems and injustice and things like that still felt very relevant to me and my story. And so I think I listened to the data that I had at the time around what I was really excited about at Pratt, and I followed that. So that's for me kind of how my story zigged and then zagged. Like I went into Pratt thinking it was going to be academic librarianship. I worked in the library actually there too, and it was super fun. I love like my librarianship background. I actually pull on some of my information knowledge experience when we talk about research operations. So it's kind of all been very relevant. But I think the key is just be open to that, but also get curious about what excites you. The through line for me is, maybe it's coming through, is people and curiosity. I've always really been interested in continuous learning. That was also why I was interested in going to library school, because I loved the ability of a career to be like, I'm never not learning. And I feel that in product design and UX, it's a space that's allowed me to continue to learn and grow. Whether that's like working with new clients, whether that's kind of working with different teams and teams of people or different disciplines, like new technology that's always evolving. There's just kind of always something new to be learning. And I think that's also a skill that will suit you well kind of in this space, is like being curious and open to learning. The last thing too is like, while my path has kind of been more management or recently, it's not the only way. And I'll talk about this in a sec, but there are many folks that I work with or have worked with who have grown into strong individual contributors or very high level senior individual contributors. And I think it's important for you folks to just keep that in mind as you're really embarking on this journey. Like, the world is your oyster. You have lots of options out there. Some things that just to keep in mind as you go into the industry is, companies and the size of those companies like might impact some of those zigs and zags that you take. But that's all really helpful and things that you can consider as you kind of really kick this off. But also nowadays, like with AI, everyone can kind of be creators, and you all are armed with the resources around how to think about problems, which I think is most exciting about kind of design, is it helps you frame problems. I'll get into that in a sec too. But I feel like there's a lot more opportunity for designers to take that frame, that thing that they're so good at around problem solving, and like really bring ideas to the world faster than they ever could have before. So those are just some reflections for me. I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of the day-to-day work, and I've touched on this a bit, but before I move on, any questions about that? Okay. I'll start here. So one thing I want to make sure I clarify is leadership is not management. So what I was talking about before is there are high level or senior level individual contributors who will set vision and strategy or scale influence through teams. It really can kind of just depend on the role and the organization that you're in. Like size of org can be a factor in that. But essentially, if we take a step back and think about, like, as I go into kind of my responsibilities as a leader, what might that look like? And kind of the impact really comes from enabling others to succeed, as you could imagine, creating systems kind of where great work is thriving and evangelizing the value of the work. So part of my days is working with others to make sure that the work that my team is doing is really integrated into the wider priorities of the organization, and talking with other leaders in the organization about the work and the insights that my team is producing, and then creating scalable processes or systems that enable the work to happen. But also, if we talk about like the impact of the work, we have like an impact tracker. So there's a process that we have around not only do we get out and socialize about it and talk about the work, and I'm making sure that our work aligns with what the product priorities are, but we're also operationalizing that. So we have an easy way to aggregate, like, how many decisions have we influenced, for example? What were the impact of those decisions? Things like that that help really kind of bring it from just the high level to the actual work that the team is doing. And as an individual contributor, as you can imagine, your impact is coming from kind of the quality of the work, how you're communicating and building alignment with your partners. But keep in mind that these don't stop being relevant kind of as a leader as well. I need to grow my craft as well. What I grow my craft in probably looks differently. I work very collaboratively with other functions, other departments in my role as well. So that doesn't stop as you grow in your career. Like, that is such a key part of my day to day, is working with disciplines outside of design, and working kind of at all levels of the organization, not just like with my peers, but working with the teams, working with other, executive leaders. And then I think the key thing here is making sure that as individual contributors, kind of executing with excellence. So planning, conducting the work that you're doing, and then delivering that work to see it through. Probably not too many surprises there. I wanted to talk through just a few like example projects and give you a sense of like the way the work can kind of scale up and down depending upon your role, the organization that you're in. So I'll start to the right. So when I was at IBM as an individual contributor, we worked on an AI explainability solutions for in the supply chain space. This was about helping customers understand how AI was making a decision to optimize their order fulfillment. So we really had to make a very complex system more human-centered. So that was really interesting. I was an individual contributor, a researcher leading that work with designers, data science, product management, engineering, and then working closely with like some really key customers who were actually about to end their contract with IBM, but then we worked with them to kind of find their opportunities, and this was resulted in like some net positive revenue for IBM. So that was really exciting. That design and research were able to be a part of that process, but it was about helping them understand the solution of this supply chain product that we were delivering on, and then how was the AI deciding to optimize their order. In the middle, I worked at a company called Shift, which is it is no longer a company, but it's a competitor, or was a competitor to Carvana. And my time at Shift was really characterized by redesigning really the full end-to-end shopping experience and checkout experience for people who are interested in buying their car online. We had a mobile app, but it was not the opportunity that we wanted to invest our time and energy in as a limited startup company. So that was one thing I didn't talk about in my journey, is when I moved in-house, I've done enterprise, which was IBM, and then Shift was a startup. But the time there was really working with my team to understand what our users' needs were. Historically, car buying and selling has been a very not transparent experience, and the industry has used that knowledge gap kind of maliciously against consumers. And so our whole thing at Shift was, well, we want to make this process transparent and easy for consumers to understand. And we used that thesis to go out and understand our consumers and then design experiences around that. So helping them understand, how do you attach financial products to your car purchase? As much as financial products are were revenue generating for the company, they were actually also in the consumer's best interest. But what we learned through research was like consumers weren't really thinking about that when they were buying their cars. So we had to do some work kind of up funnel in the shopping process to help them understand more about financial products. So that was kind of my time-ish at Shift. Going into a little bit more present day right now, really my focus and some of the journey that we're on, I would say at Anywhere is, and Anywhere talks about this themselves too, around like really modernizing our tech for real estate professionals, to simplify the workflow and integrate AI into those workflows to help streamline the work that they're doing. We have talked publicly about how we've integrated it into some of our, it's called Listings Concierge as a product. And we integrate that into help our agents with using AI to provide listing descriptions for their homes that they're selling. So there are opportunities like that we're starting to think about. How does AI really show up in the real estate professional journey? And then where might it show up for the consumer side, right? A real estate transaction is not just for a broker or an agent, but it's also for consumers who are purchasing the home. So that is, and I'm not a fan of the words digital transformation, but I was unsure how else to describe it. But that's a lot of the work that we're doing right now. All right. So I talked a lot about myself and kind of what I've been up to. Let's kind of change gears here a little bit and talk about some tips for getting into this space. Networking is a dirty word, and that's okay. We don't have to talk about it that way. But I mentioned this a bit at the top around community. You all are building community amongst yourselves, and that's key. But continue to build community. Don't just make connections. I'm sure you all are already doing this, but like joining local meetups, joining Slack channels, maybe maybe participating in like a design challenge, but engaging with these communities. It's a really great opportunity to brainstorm, learn from others, hear what their stories are, and make those build those connections that could potentially turn into something like a referral. But it also gives you an opportunity to practice some of your pitches. So getting really clear and crisp on how you talk about kind of your experience, the work that you've done, and how that might fit into like the needs of the industry or a company. I'm sure this is also not net new to y'all, but when you're describing your work, just make sure you go beyond just saying, I made it easier to do, but you're talking about the impact that it had on the business, product, or any sort of UX metrics. Just listing off tasks, I think, is, well, very easy to do nowadays, but it's really important to showcase kind of how it had an ultimate outcome on something. And I do have some examples for this one. So not impact a stakeholder liked. Stakeholder feedback is valuable, of course, but focusing really more on relevant business and product metrics. I understand if you're in school, you may not have some of these, and that's okay. You guys do work with clients though. So maybe this is a part of your conversation that you have with them around, again, I'm not sure what those engagements look like, but what are the client's goals? What are things that they care about in their business? And then how do you boil that down to the work that you're doing? And do you have an opportunity to maybe follow up with that client to see if there was a change in those metrics? But beyond that, you could even look at just relevant UX metrics. So you improve time on task. You basically measure that before and after a design change. And then you can say, hey, look, the changes that we made actually improved something and really moved the needle. The last thing, I've talked about this a little bit in my role, is changing internal processes. Like that's important to increase efficiency and efficacy of the work, especially now when some of my time recently has been partnering with my team on how do we integrate AI into our research process. And that is really about streamlining the work and increasing efficiency. So, one output is like we've been able to do additional studies because we've cut the time down in synthesizing the work, for example. So keep that in the back of your minds too when you're thinking about impact. It doesn't have to just be, excuse me, UX product or business metrics, but like maybe there was something that you changed about how the team is working. I'll get into this a little bit more in a sec as well, but I think one thing that's really important, and I hit on this a bit at the beginning around design is, oh, do y'all still see my screen?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm able to see.
Okay. Design is really a framework. When I think about kind of the core of design, it's a way to think about problems and solving problems and framing problems. And so managers are care less about the right answer and more about how you think about it. And so being able to talk about some of those problem identification and the why behind your decisions is really helpful, which again is kind of the core of the work that of designers. I would say the other thing that's really key here is focusing on storytelling. So how do you frame the work in a way of going like problem, process, impact that's really clear? I'm sure you also have heard about the STAR framework: scenario, tasks, actions, results, similar to what I was talking about before. Find a framework that works for you, but then adapt it as needed to tell the story that you need to tell. But I think at the crux of it is like, what is that story, and then how do you think about that and what the problem that you're solving and why that problem might have been worth solving. And this, I think, I want to is very critical in the age of AI. And don't just take it from me, but like take it from Harvard Business Review. So Harvard Business Review recently cited an article that foundational skills are more important than ever. This includes abilities to problem solve, clear communication styles, and the ability to work well with teams. I have always, in these conversations with students or folks who are looking to transfer into the space, I have always stressed the importance of transferable skills. Tech and tools are always changing. Now they're just changing way more rapidly than they ever have before. And so it's really important not to lose sight of some of those things that also are really foundational to doing the work and how we ultimately drive success through the work, how we work with people, how we talk about problem solving. And design really equips us with frameworks to do that. So it's about just honing that ability, but don't shy away when you are kind of pitching yourself or going out to interviews. Don't shy away from talking about this stuff too, because it's really important. It really is. It really, really is. I can't stress that enough. Like I said, especially with just the way in which technology is so rapidly changing. Okay, that's it for me. Thank you all. Questions? I'll stop sharing my screen. I'm also happy to share that deck, but like, what questions can I answer for you guys? Like, how can I help?
Thank you so much. This was so interesting. Thank you so much. I think when we sent out like the registration, if anyone else has any question, please put it on the chat or you can just unmute yourself and ask. But we did get a few questions, so I could maybe just read out some of them and then you could like answer it for us. So one was, what is your take on having a portfolio? I met a senior UXR at a major company that never had and still doesn't have a portfolio. Said most of the interviews are about like behavioral and whiteboarding. So, what do interviews for researchers, like UX researchers, look like? Was one of the question.
Yeah, whiteboarding is also a way. Sorry, I'll just make a comment here. So when I mentioned like practice, kind of articulating your thinking, whiteboarding, you're going to see that come up because that's essentially what that exercise is about. Like, how do you problem solve? Obviously, it's a bit of a constructed environment, but like, you get the gist. I think portfolios are. I thought from my point of view, I think they're pretty much an expectation. Does it shouldn't have every project ever that you worked on, like, pick a few projects and um, use that to kind of tell your story. But yes, then it depends on the company, but typically, usually when you submit a resume, you're also submitting a portfolio link as well, and then you'll have a set of interviews, whether that's a panel, whether it's a brainstorm. It depends on the organization, maybe a mix of both. Maybe you're doing a case study. you know whichever one I think the organization kind of wants to use, but you can expect to find kind of a mix of those interview activities in the industry today, where it's sometimes a portfolio review or sometimes a presentation that is more like a case study, or they might do a whiteboarding challenge. And then you might do like a set of panel interviews with folks who are not on your immediate team. So maybe like with product or engineering. So from my perspective, I feel like I was always under the impression and expectation that portfolios are a part of like submittals applications.
Thank you so much for that. There was
Hmm.
also another question. So I'll probably combine two of the questions. One was like, what are the trends that you're seeing in UX research these days? And also, I think you did touch upon this, especially how has the role shifted, changed, or been impacted with AI as a tool?
Yeah. So yes, I can answer those in one
Yeah.
question, because I would say the trends are really these days are on how we integrate AI, not into our products, but also into our process and the work that we do. And so um, what I've been working on with my team is just that. Like, how are we using AI as a part of our research process to speed up the time and also make sure that the team is spending their time in where like our skills are best suited, and where we can use AI to help with synthesis of work or kind of taking a first pass. So we did a bit of a thought exercise of like, where do we see research or AI being most valuable in research? And it's been really helpful for us in kind of planning and brainstorming kind of a first pass of like interview questions or uh, research plan approach, and also helping with like a first pass of synthesis for summary. It doesn't remove the abilities, or it doesn't remove what I think are the necessities of a researcher to kind of take that data and bring it up a level of interpretation, because AI in its current form lacks all the context of the organization, all the things that product and people are thinking about and talking about and priorities and the dynamics of the organization. It doesn't know that. So it will do a really good job of synthesizing data well. And that's great for like an initial summary, but then how do we go from kind of those findings to insights and something that actually is applicable given the organization's priorities? Um, you can give it some prompting, and we've done some experimentation around that. So like there's definitely some opportunity, but I still really see researchers as kind of orchestrators and storytellers of the work. And that's how I think like the role of research is evolving. It's a similar story when I was at IBM. You know, this is always a conversation in the industry, oh, like democratization. And that can also be considered a dirty word, but it's not. And I think it's a similar idea of how do researchers orchestrate the work, whether it's other folks doing it or whether it's AI helping to offload some of that work. They orchestrate, and then researchers focus on where their skills are best suited and their lens of interpretation on the data, what our customer needs are, what the product goals are, what our technical feasibility or technical limitations might be, and then taking all that, packaging it up, and telling a really compelling story. That's a lot of the things that my team is spending their time on, is socializing the work, not just doing the work, right? As research processes become more streamlined with AI, our opportunity lies in really talking more about the work, socializing the work, and working with our partners to align on the priorities that are going to be most impactful for our customers. So again, I think the role of the researcher is going to be just less about like I'm constantly doing interviews and more about talking about the work, because we're able to just learn so much more quickly with the tools that are coming out. And that was the other thing too. I think I mentioned to Roshni when we started, a lot of the tools that are out in the market are integrating AI into the tool themselves. So Dovetail, for example, is a research repository. So imagine you put all of your interview data in there. Well, the AI is already built in to help with summaries and synthesis. So like you've already got like an unlock there in terms of improvement to capacity and efficiency that didn't require like an external tool or anything, just more about leveraging it intentionally as part of the process. And fill in the blank of other tool. All the tools are doing nowadays, as I'm sure you all are familiar with.
Thank you so much. I think that whole idea of socializing, like that move that UX researchers are having, I think that's a very, very interesting way to look at this.
Yeah, because it actually, I think it opens up a really exciting opportunity for researchers where it's like, let's get out of the weeds. Like, let's come up and out and talk about the work more. And it really alleviates the researchers of having to feel like they need to be, um, again, like, oh, only doing the work. And socialization has always been a part of the research process. But again, I think as the time to do research becomes much more streamlined, it allows us to expand the time that we spend in that socialization process and really using research to actually drive outcomes in the business more so than we maybe ever have been able to do before.
Thank you so much for that. I think Anisha has a question. It's on the chat. I'll just read it out. Do you
Oh,
have
sure.
any suggestions for people who have started off and are new to UX? I have a background in industrial design, and do you suggest adding these projects in portfolio now? How do you also differentiate UX projects from UX research projects in portfolio?
Yeah, wait, let me look at the chat so I can. That was good. Oh, I don't
Oh,
I
I
don't
think
see
it's
that.
on the. Okay, I can probably just send it here.
Yeah, I don't see it. Um, so that's awesome. You've got that background. This is where I think that um the the part of the my presentation around transferable skills, because I would say in industrial design, I know many designers that came from that background too. I think industrial design kind of equips you with some of those still those design thinking skills and how you frame problems and think about solving problems. So I wouldn't necessarily need to like shy away from that. I would just figure out how do you want to tell the story of your background going from industrial design into product design and kind of what maybe prompted that shift for you. I don't, it's hard for me to say yes or no to adding those into your portfolio because I don't know what those projects are. So I'm unfortunately I don't have a recommendation there because I don't know the projects that you're speaking to. So my email is in the presentation. Roshni, I'll send it to you. And then feel free to follow up with me and we can maybe talk more deeply. But how do you different you um, do you need to differentiate them in the portfolio? I think it kind of depends on who's your audience. Like, are you trying to go for research roles? Are you trying to go for design? Are you trying to go for hybrid? And then that should maybe help you decide kind of what are you needing to differentiate and then what's the story that you want to tell with the work that you've done. So maybe taking some time to think about what roles are you targeting? What types of organizations are you targeting? When I was looking for a job, I would kind of always write down like lists and I would take some time to really think like, oh, this is like a high priority for me, or it's a lower priority, or this is like a must have or a nice to have. I don't know, however you want to organize that, but like maybe give yourself a little bit of a framework to think about roles that you might be interested in. And then that should help you decide, do I need to differentiate these in the first place? One, and then two, if so, how might you do that? I feel like from my experience, it just depends on the roles that you're looking. So for me, I was really interested in research roles only. And that was a very clear story I could tell. I didn't have to differentiate things. But maybe in your portfolio, it's like different tags or the way that you talk about the work. Again, I'm not really sure without knowing more context about you and what you're interested in. Any tips on how you talk about your work and projects that are under several NDAs? It's a great question. Um, I feel that struggle entirely. For NDA work. So one thing when this happened for us in consulting, when we would try to sell to clients to get new business, but other work was under NDA and we couldn't talk about the work to the other clients. So we used to extrapolate and talk about like a media company would need X. And so there is a level of extrapolation that you need to probably do potentially. I don't know what's in the NDA either. I'm just telling you my experience, so please take this with a grain of salt and be intentional about this, because ultimately, like, I didn't sign the NDA. So what we would do is extrapolate kind of the information in a way that we could still tell the story about what the problem was that we were solving, how we solved it, and then the output of that, which is essentially a case study. But we wouldn't mention the client name. We wouldn't really show any screens. You could use, like, I mean, nowadays you can have AI kind of generate some pictures for you, or you can use like oh my gosh, why can't I think of the word? What are those generic pictures? I was literally just doing this. You can use like an Unsplash. I cannot think of the word right now. An Unsplash or a Pexels to get like some oh my gosh, some generic photos, or have AI kind of put some things together. Stock photos. Yes. Thank you so much. Yes. Oh my gosh. Struggling in there. Some stock photos. You can use some of those to help you tell the story without talking about the client or revealing anything sensitive about the client themselves. The other thing too is, obviously, depending upon the tool that you're using for your portfolio, it could also be password protected, which could be something else to do. But just some things to consider. Again, you know the NDA kind of better than I do, so keep kind of my feedback in mind with what might be in that NDA. What other questions? I know we're at time, but I'm happy to hang a few more minutes. What do you mean by that? You maybe want to come off mute and describe it a little bit more to me?
Yes. Hi, Diana. So it's a great, so thanks for such an interesting session, and thanks to everyone organizing it. Yeah, my question is more along like, so in the past 4 or 5 years, I have signed several NDAs that I do not know the contents exactly of, because it was through a service company. And all I know is that, yeah, I mean, it's just safe to like extrapolate details and stuff. And while the names and stuff can be changed, yeah, more about the problem itself. Because in interviews, I've been asked, what exactly did you do on this project? And I don't know how to, even though I've tried, like it becomes really hard to not give away the exact solution.
Interesting. Without understanding a little bit more, it's hard for me to talk about it. But I would say, like, so in my example projects, you see, I didn't mention actually any company names, and I talked about the problem that we were solving pretty high level. So maybe that could be a guidance. So for example, like a website redesign, and then I backed into what the problem we were solving, who we were solving it for, but I never once talked about the company. I just talked about the space of like car sales. I only mentioned shift to you guys on this call. But maybe that's a way for you to consider, like, if you take a step back and you think about what you were doing and who you were doing with, you could talk about, like, I worked with product engineering and design. I was responsible for delivering high and low fidelity mockups. I was responsible for delivering red lines. I was responsible for delivering and being a part of the QA process. Like, those are all very tangible things that you may or may not have done. I don't know what your role was, to solve the problem of redesigning a website. And then in terms of talking about impact, you can also talk about that a little bit more broadly. Like, we improved usability, we improved engagement. Like, I think there's a way around it to talk about it without kind of having to necessarily mention the client or the company. Go ahead. Feel free to jump back in.
Yes. Sorry, about the impact and things like that. Many people recommend that you put in statistics like, we increased customer engagement by 20% and things
Right.
like that. But none of the projects I worked on actually measured any of these. So do I just not have them? And
Are there ways for you to maybe reflect back on and say like, well, our goal was to improve usability. And so you could say, well, we improved usability. Like, is that fair?
yeah, I mean, yeah, that would be the basic thing, but more about like how exactly did we do that? How did we impact customer? We don't have statistics, but like, is it okay to
Yeah.
make numbers up? Is what I'm asking.
I mean, I'm not going to suggest that.
Okay.
But I think ultimately you need to do what you feel like might be right. Um, but I would say like I have definitely been in your shoes before and have figured out a way to still tell the story that incorporates some sort of information around like even if it's just a visual trending diagram up and saying usability.
Hmm.
That that could generally help you tell the story without feeling like you need to put a number on the slide.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yes, yes. Thanks.
Yeah, like there's like that even that emoji that's like the chart going up. Like
Yeah.
like we improved usability and they're like, well, what did you improve it at? You might be like, well, I was only around this project for a short amount of time and I don't have all the information. I don't know. You could think about the
Hmm.
best way to wordsmith that, but I would say like don't be afraid to still kind of get crisp on what your goals are and then end the story with a clear um like conclusion to the story, right? Of like our goal was X and we did X.
Hmm.
Chapter closed kind
Mhm.
of thing. And then reflect, right? Like, oh, well, along the way, I learned A, B, and C, and I would have partnered differently, or I would have done A, B, and C differently because if I had more time and money, I would have tried these other things. So I think that's also important to just consider, again, like practice articulating your thinking about it, not just um, the project itself, but like how would you, like, what would you change about it, if anything at all?
Hmm.
Does that help? Again, it's kind of
Yes.
hard for me. It's hard for me to answer and give exact and specifics without seeing what you're doing or looking at a portfolio with you. So again, I'll send you guys my information if you want to follow up. I'm happy to chat more.
Sure. Thank you so much.
Okay, classes. I'm sure the classes have evolved since I've been there. It's been 10 years, y'all. Like it's been so long. But I did take that usability course with Craig. That was the course that I had my aha moment and I was like, I love this. And it was super fun. I did take design courses. I don't know if I would say that they helped with, I can't remember. Honestly, I can't remember. It feels so long. Um, I'm sure they do help. Like, I think there was the information architecture one. Is he still doing that? Yeah. Yeah. I took that one. That one was great. Again, really helpful because I think now it's less about the IA of like a website, but more thinking about the IA of a system and the like as we move to technology that is powered by AI or generative AI, it's going to be important for I think designers to think less about interfaces and more about like systems thinking and how do we design a system to achieve the outcomes that users are hoping for. Um, I also know, so is Pamela still teaching at Pratt? Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Pam, first of all, I also love Pam. Pam was my first boss out of school, and she is the best. So if you have an opportunity to take a class with Pam, I would highly recommend it. I think Armin is also teaching. I worked with Armin at IBM. So I know Armin as well. So like when I say you guys are in good hands, like you're in the best. I know Pam's doing some really cool courses, and I appreciated some of that work that I did with her when I was like when I was working with her around emotionally intelligent design. Is that kind of her? Yeah. And like speculative design, all that stuff. Really interesting. And very helpful again to think about design beyond just interfaces. So I think there's probably a lot of things to do. Can you all tell me a little bit more about like what's the course curriculum look like these days? And then maybe I can better answer your question. Shelly, I don't know if you want to.
Pamela, yeah, I think Pamela is taking speculative and also now UX for AI, actually very relevant to what you were talking about. So that's a new course she started like with this like fall semester. So apart from that, we have service design, which I think deals with systems thinking a lot more working
Yes.
services, like from a holistic point of view. Then we still do have the usability theory. I think those are the foundational courses, and then we have the information architecture course,
Yes.
and then we have like advanced usability, and then digital analytics, digital accessibility. So
Nice.
yeah, some of
Those
the
all
courses.
sound really great. I love that Pam is doing the AI stuff. Pamela has been like in this space since before it was cool. Like when I was working with her and when started working with her 10 years ago, like she was talking about AI at that time. And so she's really been at the forefront of um, how we're thinking about AI powered experiences. So like that's probably going to be a really fun class. Honestly, I'm a little jealous. I'm like, do I come back to school because these all sound great? Ethnography studies, also very interesting. The one thing, I don't know what that course curriculum looks like, but just from a practical standpoint, we don't always get to do like ethnographies. I wish we could do more of that, but we've gone on site and done like a contextual inquiry at like a real estate office. But when you work in a B2B space, business to business, these are folks who are like working in their jobs and just don't have like a ton of time to always host researchers or designers. So just keep that in mind as you think about the applicability going into the industry. Digital accessibility, incredibly important. It's actually one of our priorities kind of on our product design team. I think, again, it just depends on your interests and things that you might be thinking about in your career and what is exciting to you right now. So if we kind of take some of my advice around like, find what excites you, like what's exciting to you, and then how do you kind of spend this time learning, because like that was one thing I loved about being in school was I had an opportunity to like really be a sponge and soak up so much information, and then kind of that helped me again like get into the industry. But I was ultimately just following things that I was super excited about, and that I felt like were relevant skills that I could use going out from school. But I think a lot of that, I don't think there's a course that you're going to take that won't be relevant. Like digital analytics, we do that. All of our products are instrumented with tools like Amplitude or Google Analytics. I don't know if that's what you're talking about when you say digital analytics, but that's what I think of, because research is so much more than just like doing studies too. It's like synthesizing data across the organization, because UX research is not the only data producing function, right? We work really closely with like our product marketing team. We also have the analytics. There's customer service teams. Like there are so many sources of the customer voice. And I think, again, when I talked about like researchers as the storytellers, well, like how do you kind of take all those disparate data sources, maybe pull it together and tell a very compelling story? So there's lots of like good stuff happening, I'm sure, in that digital analytics class too. What else? This is so cool. I'm so excited for you all. But did you walk out feeling strong? Yeah, that's a great question. No, I didn't, but I also was more qualitative in just my background in general. So as I mentioned, I came from a social sciences background where our focus was much more qualitative. But I do think I don't think quant is more important, but I think a well-rounded experience is helpful. And so if you're feeling like actually it's something I've been working on with my team because we're also just thinking about how we grow our quant skills. There are so many courses available. Like that's how we're learning about it now in the industry is like there's a lot of things online that are for free that my team and I are using to upskill in quant. So I think if you feel like that's maybe an area that you're interested in or things that you want to grow in, like there's plenty of stuff out there, I think, for you to upskill yourself on and also just show like an initiative of learning to your potential employers. Like this was something I didn't just take a class on and I like went out and learned about it myself. I think it'll be interesting. So for me, yes, like I think having kind of well-rounded data perspective is important because it allows you then as a researcher to know, given the situation, what type of data might be the best to answer the question. So something might come up and you might be like, oh, we're going to use our analytics to answer that question versus like doing interviews or a diary study. Like our digital analytics help us really understand. And then this is how much data we might need, or these are, we might want to do a multivariate or an A/B test in production. Here's how that might look. Anyways, I think there's some really interesting stuff to think about, even in like getting more serious in survey design. One method we've been using lately is max diff. That's a really interesting, I can send a link as a survey method, just something to kind of think about when you do like product prioritization input. Max diff is really cool for that. So rather than just asking about like importance or value, it helps you really enable or have users make like trade-off decisions essentially without realizing it or asking them up front, like you're making a trade-off. Anyways, just something to think about there. Another question. What have you ever in? When have I not had issues? I think is the better question. Yeah, 100%. 100% I have had issues. I don't have a blanket response for how I go about convincing them because I think my approach depends on the person in front of me and what's driving their motivation. So I would never just say like, this is going to help you convince all your stakeholders and clients to buy into research. I don't feel like that's a fair answer to you all. And I think that's actually not very helpful. And so I think the way to go about answering that is uncovering and learning a little bit more about who you're working with. What are their goals? What drives them? What motivates them? What excites them? What keeps them up at night? And doing a little bit like internal stakeholder research. And then that for me is how I then start to align the research efforts with what they're doing. And then they'll start to see like, oh yeah, we're after the same thing. Like, of course we should be doing research. If only it was that easy. It's not always that easy, but just telling you kind of my approach and what I would do or have done in that situation is I spend a lot of time just like getting to know the people that I work with and like what their goals are, because it allows me then to make sure that my team or the work that my team is doing or that I'm doing ultimately aligns with things that they care about. And that it seems that we care about shared outcomes and shared goals. So that I think is like ultimately what, again, like how I approach that question. But yes, that happens all the time. So if and when you come across that, don't be surprised because it will happen. Resources that you find helpful in your career journey. Oh gosh, so much so. Actually, one thing that my team and I are reading right now We do book club, by the way. We're reading this book, Research Practice. Can you guys see the book? Shameless plug. I'm a contributing author into one of the chapters or essays, whatever. But what I like about that, you're good. What I like about this one is it's not just another like, here's how you do the best usability, or here's how you do like the best blah blah blah. It's actual advice from people that work in the industry. So your question around like how do you convince stakeholders, you'll hear another perspective from somebody who does it in here. Like I'm just one voice in the industry, right? These are things that I would do, but it gives you an ability to get perspectives from others, and then allows you to kind of use some of your judgment and adaptability and applicability, thinking, and like how might you apply that in the situation that you're in. So we've been reading this on my team lately. That's been our focus. What's the title of the book? Here, I'll send it to y'all. Research. Greg Bernstein also is the author. If you don't follow him or have familiar with his work, he's really awesome. So he's another cool one. Here, I'll put can I put an Amazon link in there? Is that okay, Roshni? I don't know what's allowed or not allowed.
Yeah, I think that should be fine. Yeah.
Okay, there you go. That's the book.
Oh yeah, I think we can do that actually. Like all the links and everything, Diana, if you could just like if we can also share your slide deck and your email
Yeah.
with the students, then yes, I could just put all these together in an email and share it with all of them.
Yeah, in the slide deck, my email is on the last slide. So just feel free, like I said, to kind of look at that deck and email me, or Roshni will kind of pull it out and send it to you all because we've been emailing. But yeah, just, like I said, feel free to think of me as a resource. If you want to request me on LinkedIn, that's totally fine. I'm happy to help. I've been in your shoes before, and I understand how overwhelming it might feel. Maybe I'm putting a little bit of my own self in your shoes, but I know for me, when I was in school, I was equally excited as I was overwhelmed. And I was like loving it, but I was like, oh my gosh, there's so many things. So I totally get it. And don't worry, you're not alone, and you will get through this. And like, school is an amazing opportunity that you all are able to be there with like a great program and you have such great people around you who are like, very well seasoned practitioners in the industry. So like, yeah, just I can't say enough good things about Pratt. Also, it's just a great program for me. So I really loved it.
Thank you so much for your time today. This was super
Of
insightful. Thank you so
course.
much. And we have a
Of
next talk
course.
coming up on October 24th, so we will send out the invite soon.
Okay. Thank you all so much. Thanks, Roshni, for having me. Bye,
Thank you.
everyone.